Hello and welcome to the Hibs Observer morning briefing with myself, Liam Bryce, joined as always by Patrick McPartland to look back over Hibs 3, Livingston 0 in the Scottish Premiership. But just before we get started, taking a quick pause to spotlight our new sponsor, MPH Group, the award-winning family-run business excelling in home improvements across mainland Scotland. Specialising in bespoke kitchens, bathrooms, and high efficiency boilers, MPH Group brings your dream home to reality. They've recently achieved the prestigious Construction Line Gold, Safe Contractor, and ISO certifications, underscoring their commitment to excellence, safety, and quality management in all their projects. This accomplishment is testament to their dedication to providing the best possible service to their clients. And they're also proud to announce their latest KBB showroom in Dunfermline, which is now open for appointments. Experience the dedication and craftsmanship that sets MPH Group apart. Visit www.mph.group and see how they can transform your home. Deep breath after that, sorry. And now into Saturday's game. Hibs 3, Livingston 0. And I think the question in the title there, Patrick, is the right one. Have Hibs clicked it into gear at exactly the wrong time with this international break coming up?
Yeah, I think it's one of those, isn't it? You don't look at a 3-0 victory with anything other than positivity, especially after the run Hibs have been on. I know it's been 6 league games undefeated, but at the same time, we look at the bulk of the second half against Ross County, and then Saturday's performance, certainly for the first 45 minutes, if not the full 90, it did sort of feel like Hibs were starting to click into gear a little bit. Some really good kind of synergy going on. I think the right hand side with Chris Cadden and Ellie Yuan, which we'll touch on later, and just Adam Lafondra's performance at the tip of that sort of front four, just and the defence as well, just as a whole, midfield, just good performances across the park. And now, a sort of lengthy break until they get to do it again, which is obviously a benefit for players who are injured and getting them back. But I think it's about momentum at this point of the season. And you speak to different players, they'll say different things. Some of them will say they want to be playing as many games as possible, and the international break is, it kind of interrupts that. Whereas others will be saying it'll be good to get a break and kind of reset. Get key players back and go again. But I can't help but think just the way Hibs have been playing, the way they responded to the setback on Wednesday night, helped in part, I think, by Livingston being quite under the weather, both in a sense of having had the sickness bug in midweek, and also just not performing to the levels that we've seen them perform to against Hibs at Easter Road and in West Lothian and against other teams. So yeah, I think just a performance like that, you want to be playing again as soon as possible to keep that momentum going. But I think the big sort of test now for Nick Montgomery and the players is to just sort of pick up where they left off when domestic football resumes.
Yeah, it was it was nice to see, I think, a fast start at Easter Road. I think certainly in the circumstances as well, if you are coming up against a side who, it was obviously publicised that there'd been illness in the camp at Livingston. I think David Martindale said it was a sort of flu going around the place. If there's, you're coming up against a team that are already struggling and they're a wee bit under the weather, you kind of want to get after them as quickly as possible. It'd be a bit ruthless, a bit merciless in the face of their plight almost. And Hibs did that. It's a really, really good start to the game, which I can't really recall it too many early goals at Easter Road this season. I'm sure somebody will correct me, my memory's terrible. But it was, because coming into it, sort of maybe had the feel of, could it pan out a bit like the Ross County game at home, where it was a bit of a slog, team set up deep behind the ball, not showing an awful lot of attacking ambition, and obviously the best way to counteract that is to score early on, and it just it completely changes the picture of the game. Livingston's game plan goes out the window in terms of trying to keep it scoreless for as long as possible. Really enjoyed some of the football in that first half an hour, 25 minutes particularly. It was kind of as sort of slick and clinical as I think we've seen Hibs for quite some time. Some really good finishes, good build-up, good interchange. a few standouts. Obviously, you mentioned Adam Lafondra, Chris Cadden, and Ellie Yuan, who I think we're going to take a more detailed look at on the website. Later on today, because everything seemed to come down that side. David Martindale as well. He kind of highlighted that in his post-match press conference, that they were really easy for Hibs to play through Livingston. So it was one of those ones where I don't know, how much a combination of it was of Hibs being pretty good and Livingston being really poor, do you think?
Yeah, I think there was certainly an element of both. I think I actually asked you that about 15 minutes in. I said, are Hibs really in the races today, or is it just a case of Livingston haven't turned up yet? But I think you point out that when there is, when a side does start quickly like that, gets an early goal or 2 early goals in Hibs' case, then I think that it does make the rest of the game like much easier in terms of controlling it, in terms of game management, because you can say, right, we've got the early goal or goals plural. They're going to have to either come out at us and give us more room in behind, or they're going to have to try and kind of plug the leaks. And I think that's something that we've been probably quite critical of Hibs under Montgomery, is that they don't ever really seem to have a fast start from the start of a game. You've seen them come out after half time, and there's like obviously there's been maybe a bit of a rocket in the dressing room from Montgomery. I mean, Wednesday night at Ross County would be a perfect example. The first half torturous at times, just really exactly what you sort of picture when you say midweek game against Ross County in March. It's that sort of just not a lot to like, and you're sort of like trying to like mark out where the exits are in case you make a quick getaway. Obviously, we don't have that choice, but I think you could see a noticeable change in how Hibs were playing after the break, and I do think part of that was the introduction of Adam Lafondra. I just think, said this on Saturday on social media before he scored the third goal, that even when he's not scoring goals, even when he's not actually setting them up, he's just such a handful in the box in that final third. And I think he's just got that intelligence. He's got that sort of nous that you accrue when you've been playing for as long as he has at the level that he's been playing at. And Livingston just couldn't deal with him, and as a result, that just sort of created space for the other players. So I think that certainly helped, and the front four, Emi Marcondes, Mizian Malida on the other side, they just seemed to really click. But it wasn't just them. Obviously, there was some good performances from the midfielders. Joe Newell and Edgar Triantis really, really solid in there, moving the ball about well. We mentioned Cadden, who I think has been really impressive since he came back from his layoff, especially to play as much as he has inside the last sort of 7 days or so, has been really testament to his approach and his dedication to getting back fit, and not just coming back and being fit, but coming back and being fit and being able to contribute. And then obviously you've got Jordan Abita on the other side, and it was just, I think everything just seemed to click for Hibs, and I don't think I think it'd be unfair to say that was all down to Livingston having a disastrous start, which I think Davy Martindale also alluded to when he spoke after the game. I think we've been saying for a while that if it does click for Hibs, then there is a real possibility that they could give a team like a right good thrashing. For want of a better description, like you think if they take the chances, if things work out, then yeah, they could get 5 or 6 goals. And I think after about 22 minutes on Saturday, you start to think, is this the game where that's going to happen? And I think it's still a little bit, like I say, you don't look back at a 3-0 victory with that was that comfortable for Hibs and say, well, here's a list of problems I had with that game. Whether you're a fan, whether you're a player, whether you're in the media, but I think Nick Montgomery will have seen enough in that game that will have sort of pleased him. But I think he's like, there's always things that can be improved on, and I think Hibs could have scored more goals. I think there was quite a kind of drop off in just how clinical they were in the second half. Now, maybe that's almost sort of inevitable when you're 3-0 up at half time. There's not that same kind of determination and drive to keep going. But it's also the fact, for a lot of those players, it's the third game in 6 days. So, you have to imagine fatigue comes into it. I mean, you saw Cadden being replaced because he was unable to continue. Mizian, obviously, who's observing Ramadan at the moment, was taken off 10 minutes into the second half. It's just that, I think that did kind of disrupt the general flow. But at the same time, you don't want to be, obviously some of these players are, going into the international break and have games for their country. but you also don't want to, you want to be able to spend time with the players who are there. You want them to be fit. You want them to be able to work on, work on sort of set plays and things like that in training. You don't want to have another sort of 4 or 5 on the sidelines who can't really take part in training until the end of the break, which then means you're going into the resumption of league games in sort of a worse place than you were. So the only complaint, if you like, would be that they could have scored more goals. They could have made it more clinical, and that goal difference could be very important come the end of the season. But I just think players were on top of their game. There was a reaction from Wednesday night's sort of late drama, and everything just clicked. And I think Hibs have threatened to do that for a while. And I think when you've got as many new players coming in as they did in January, the 6 new signings, 7 obviously with Owen Bevan, but given that he's now gone back to Bournemouth and that's been cancelled, we'll keep it at 6. That's a lot of new players, and a lot of them have come into the starting lineup. And on top of that, you've had players coming back from international duty, and it's just trying to get everyone used to each other, trying to get that kind of cohesion, not only between sort of front and back, but between the 4 defenders, between those in midfield, and between the forward line. And Nick Montgomery, again, he's been consistent in his messaging that once players are up to speed, we are going to start to see this. And I think that's what we're seeing, that Emi Marcondes and Mizian Malida are the 2 kind of obvious ones. I think they hadn't played a lot of top level football before they came to Hibs. You could see sort of signs of rust when they first started playing. Look back to Mizian's debut against Rangers, and there was a little bit of kind of raised eyebrows about this sort of like obviously the fanfare there'd been when they managed to sign him, and then you see that performance and you think, well, is this just because he's a bit rusty, or have Hibs kind of been sold a pap here? But I just think it's inevitable that the more these players play with each other, the more they sort of work on attacking movements, the more they work on defending as well, then you are going to see a performance like this. And I think even in the games since probably the January transfer window that Hibs have lost, for the most part there have been good bits, and certainly against Celtic, they were very unlucky not to take anything from that game. And you can see things, they are going in the right direction. So I think I think it's just that managers don't get a lot of time in football these days, but I think that's kind of what this is just giving players a chance to kind of build up match fitness. Don't ask too much of them too soon, and you're kind of reaping the rewards now with performances like that. And the sort of biggest test, like I said, is just kind of be able to pick up where they left off when domestic football resumes. Obviously, a trip to Rangers not the easiest game to to resume football with, but it's, you would hope that whatever the outcome, the Hibs can sort of look at the way they played in the first half against Livingston and think like that's kind of like the benchmark. That's the kind of minimum of how they should be playing for the bulk of every game, no matter the opponent, no matter the venue, no matter the competition. So I think the real test will be seeing how they kind of respond to that. And obviously with the international break, that is that might become a factor as well. But I think momentum's one thing, but when things are clicking like they have done, then I think it's just a case of Montgomery saying to the players, remember that performance, the first 45 minutes against Livingston, that's got to be the kind of benchmark from now until the end of the season. And they do that, and they should finish the season strongly. And I think with players coming back from injury, you do have a squad that's capable of doing that. You've got a strong starting 11, and then you've got strong options off the bench. So I think cautiously, I think it bodes well. And like I say, the proof will be in the pudding when they come back. It's not the easiest game to go into, but it does feel like the Hibs team are going in the right direction. It is taking a while, and there have been a few kind of dead ends and sort of, I don't know what you want to call it, sort of wrong turnings along the way. But I do think there are signs of progress, and I think it's just whether or not they can kind of keep that going and maintain until the end of the season for a strong finish to the campaign.
Yeah, consistency is I feel like we talk about it all the time, don't we? Like
we're very consistent in that.
Yeah, we are consistently talking about consistency, but it is just the key thing. I don't it wasn't any great surprise. I think that this kind of collection of players, produced, the performance that they did for parts of Saturday. I think everybody's, there's no, doubt that they've got that in them. It's just you just not seeing it quite often enough, and it's one of those things that makes you wonder if, even, nobody's, expecting, to win every single game every week. It just doesn't happen in this league out with, generally, the top two teams. But even just maybe a slight bit more consistency, and you kind of makes you wonder where else this season might have gone. Because obviously, again, we've touched on it. The ambition now is to get into the top six, and that is quite, reduced from what it would have been for Hibs at the start of the season. So again, it's something we've touched on so many times, but you just wonder where their side could go and what it could do if they could just be a bit more consistent in how they produce results. But I think I agree that it was good to be able to respond to the Ross County result in the way that they did, because that could have been a real, really take the wind out of your sails. That, I mean, because it's everything that comes with it. It's the journey up, the manner of losing the 2 points at the end, and then you've got to stew on that all the way back down from Dingwall. Can be difficult to pick yourself up from that. So I think, kind of maybe just on that note, I kind of want to just single out Joe Newell for a bit. I think it was kind of abundantly clear that there was nobody more frustrated with how it panned out on Wednesday night than him. It's probably as frustrated as I've seen a player at full time in any game this season. You could tell that one, it really kind of stung. So for then, I felt like going into Saturday, it was obvious that he was the one that was leading by example. Obviously, he's got the captain's armband. It's kind of a prerequisite, but I mean, it's it's easier said than done. Sometimes I thought he was really, really good on Saturday. Others probably take the plaudits in terms of getting the goals and assists, but I felt like he was the driving force. Some really good passes, and in times as well, he picks his moments to drive through midfield, which I like at times. And he was really quite effective at doing that, because I think Hibs got a lot of joy just going through the middle of the pitch at times. Livingston, like, kind of huge holes there to exploit, and it was as if he could see that, and he was kind of determined to take advantage of it. And I think it was obvious when David Martindale he took off. I think was it Stephen Bradley midway through the first half. So it was kind of getting to that point where it was kind of such one-way traffic that the Livingston manager was kind of compelled into making early changes. But yeah, I think Jono, he got man of the match on Saturday. I think I heard that announced over the tannoy. Yeah, I felt it was kind of worth singling him out, because I thought he was excellent without being in amongst creating or scoring the goals. I kind of thought he provided the platform for Hibs to kick on and get that.
We've said this. We've said this so often that a big part of the Hibs team is not just individual performances. Obviously count. When you look at Adam Lafondre, who's involved in all 3 goals on Saturday. Early Yuan with 2 assists. Mizian Malida getting on the score sheet again. Keeping up his quite sort of impressive run of goal contribution since he's come to the club. But you need like a solid foundation, and I think we've seen that with the defence. I mean, another clean sheet's not to be sniffed at. Thought Rocky Bashiri, Will Fish, really good at the heart of defence. Fullbacks as well. We've talked about Abita and Caden, very very solid performances. But the big thing about this Hibs team is the spine. Like, there have been times, I think the St Mirren game, the 3-0 defeat's an obvious one, but there have been other games where you've thought Hibs are actually, they don't have that kind of spine through the middle. It's sort of the basis for like a sort of strong, solid team. And I think Montgomery, to his credit, has probably recognised this. And I think it's been really interesting to see him kind of adapt that since probably since the January transfer window. And now you've had obviously he brings in Nathan Mariah Welch, who brings something different to that midfield. He's changed the formation. You've got Nectar Triantis in there, who's just been probably not too much of a kind of overstatement to say he's been a bit of a revelation in that sort of number 6 role. Obviously, as a player who was signed as a centre back, played a couple of times there, and everyone thought maybe not quite what we need there. But then they moved him into defensive midfield, and he just seems to have really kind of found his mojo, if you like. And I think just, he was good at Ross County. I thought he was good again at the weekend. He was, I think, one of the standouts against Rangers in the cup game, despite the result. You can see that there's a player there, and I think that's made a big difference to Hibs in midfield, and it's allowing, it allows other players to then, produce their best. And I think Joe Newell is one of those players. Like, he's such a polarizing figure with the fan base. He's been here. He's been here so long compared to some players. He's sort of, been there, done it. He's, seen all there is to see in a Hibs shirt. But, I think there's still some people like not quite convinced by him, and it's the sort of like, one good game in 5, that sort of thing. But I do think he is one of those players who maybe does a lot of the unseen work. We obviously singled out his ball for Adam Lafondra to score on Wednesday night. There was obviously that drive and run on Saturday that led to one of the goals, and he's got that in his locker. And obviously with Nick Montgomery sort of earmarking him as the kind of captain at the moment, obviously there is a bit of debate because Paul Hanlon's the club captain. You've had David Marshall was skipper at times last season, but some players, when they get the armband, it seems to almost sort of diminish their performance. But I think with Newell, it's almost kind of given this platform to kind of produce even better. And I think he has been consistently, again, there's consistency. He has been consistently, performing strongly since they sort of changed the shape in midfield, and since he brought in, Mariah Welch and, Triantis in there as well. And there's also Luke Amos. I know he's out injured at the moment, but, when we've seen him playing, it's just, I just think it can't be overlooked how important it is when you've got a midfield that you've got clearly defined roles for the midfielders. Because it's one thing to have a midfielder who can do it all, all action, box to box, great stuff, can play the 6 and 8 or a 10. But I think, that doesn't really work when you're trying to get results, when you're sort of chasing, as high a finish as possible in the top 6. As Hibs are, I think you need to have midfielders with clearly defined roles. And I think at the moment, when you've got Triantis in there as a kind of destroyer, and then you've got Newell who can just, he can do the runs forward, he can do the box-to-box role, and then you've got Emi Marcondes as, the sort of classic 10. I think that just works really well. And I think if you are going to be playing this sort of, 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3, you need your midfielders to have clearly defined roles. And I think that's been one of the sort of big changes in this Hibs team. And I think one of the reasons why they're looking a lot more solid. They're looking a lot more kind of impressive. And, it'll be why the sort of key stats, the expected goals are going up as well. I suspect it's also having an impact on the defence as well, having, a midfielder in front of them who they know is going to be sort of dropping back, to help when they're on the ball. And then you've got someone like Triantis to kind of, screen the defence as well. So it's, I totally agree with you. I think he's, maybe doesn't get as much credit as he deserves at times. Obviously, he gets credit when, there are some games where he is, an obvious standout. But I think even in the games where the performance of others maybe overshadows him, it's still, it's still a lot of what he does enables the team to play the way they do. And, I think, it's definitely the right thing to do to highlight his sort of contribution at the moment. And, also just, look at the steps that the coaching staff have taken to enable that, to sort of bring the best out of him and the team as a whole.
Yeah, Hibs obviously come out of the weekend back into the top 6. Obviously Dundee didn't play yesterday against Rangers. It's extremely, it's very, very Scottish football that we're heading towards April and games are still being called off because of the weather. We bit of depressing one, that. But it's 3 games to go until the split now. Hibs right in the mix for it. But do you think to take 6 points perhaps from those last 3, do you think that'll be enough to see it over the line?
This is the Scottish Premiership we're talking about. I don't think you can say anything with any sort of conviction. I just, we've seen already this season that you can get sort of like bonkers results. So, I mean, it should, yes. I mean, you can look at the permutations, and I'm sure a lot of Hibs fans out there are doing exactly that at this moment in time. It should be, I think. I think, we were talking earlier about momentum. I think they do have that momentum that, they're kind of on that upward trend. I mean, I know there was the performance against Ross County, but if you if you take the approach that I think Nick Montgomery is, which is, it was a kind of free call by the officials, and if it had gone the right way, then we wouldn't be talking about a 2-2 draw. We'd be talking about Hibs winning 2-1. The performances are heading in the right direction, and I think in terms of things like expected goals conceded, key passes, stuff like that, I think it's really promising going into these games that Hibs do seem to be just clicking into gear. And again, they're doing this without Dylan Vente, they're doing it without Martin Boyle, they're doing it at times without Lewis Miller. So there's like 3 or 4 starters arguably who are missing, and Hibs are still able to put in results and performances like sort of most of the second half against Ross County, like Saturday against Livingston. And I think that has to sort of has to stand them in good stead going into the final 3 games. And I mean, obviously, you say 6 points because we're kind of almost assuming that that trip to Ibrox isn't going to yield anything. I know you're not saying that. I know it's not like a
I'm not writing it off, but I think in terms of, it's not one that you would hang your hat on, really.
No, there's been a lot of evidence so far this season that suggests that it probably will be quite a difficult one. But again, like I just said, this league is bonkers, and you just never know. I mean, it's I think you look at the way Rangers have been playing. You look at how Philippe Clement has them organised. They put in some really good performances, but no one's unbeatable. And I think I'm not saying this like entirely seriously, but if you look at his performances against Rangers under Montgomery, 4-0, 3-0, 2-0, improvements are being made. Not suggested that the games, the next games. Yeah, but exactly. You can look at that and say that they obviously are improving, and the sort of first game at Ibrox was a write-off. The game against them in January, Easter Road, was also disappointing. But again, I think there were probably maybe 1 or 2 green shoots where you thought, oh yeah, that's not bad. And there were players getting chucked in there for the debut who hadn't played for a while. Marcondes is one. Mizian's another. Luke Amos, I think, came off the bench as well. Mm-hmm. So you could say, when you look back to the Scottish Cup game, like obviously there was, it's been remembered for the 2 red cards. It's been remembered for the controversy and the drama, but at times Hibs were playing, did play some good stuff, and did come close to that goal when Mizian was sort of hassling Jack Butland when he took that pass back, and it almost resulted in a goal. And it's it's fine margins. If that goes in, then it maybe changes the entire kind of complexion of the game. And I just think as you say, like there's a difference between targeting a certain number of points from a certain number of games and hoping as the manager and players that you'll get more than that. But I think it will be interesting to see how Hibs perform against Rangers at Ibrox when they come back, because it's it will give us like a good indication of where the side is and how they're kind of set up for the remainder of the pre-split fixtures, and then obviously the post-split games as well. Because you look at last season when Hearts seemed to be clearly in third, and nobody was going to take that away from them. And then they ended up scrapping with Hibs for 4th on the final day. So I'm not suggesting anything like that is going to happen again. I'm certainly not saying you can bank on something like that happening. But it's just that the kind of the unknown in football, that if Hibs can just keep on this trajectory of improving with each game and doing it for longer periods of time, then anything is possible. But they certainly should be looking to take out, say, a minimum of 6 points from those 3 games. I think it's the Hibs way that nothing is straightforward. We've seen this countless times this season alone, never mind in recent history. But I just think if they are clicking into gear, and Montgomery has found this kind of setup that works, that gets the best out of not just the starting 11 but the players who come on. And if Mizian can keep up his form, if Eli Yuan can keep up the bulk of his performance at the weekend, there were still a couple of bits where you could hear the howls of derision from the fans, but you can't really argue with sort of like 18 goal contributions in 39 games. It doesn't really bear thinking about where Hibs would be without his without his input this season. So, frustrating though he can be at times, there is that, he does have that quality. And, you just sort of, I think you look at the remaining fixtures, pre and post split, and just think if everyone who's starting regularly can sort of finish the season strongly, then, who knows? But, certainly it should be, there shouldn't be any sort of doubt that, a minimum 6 points from those 3 games has to be the target, like at least. And I think, of what we've seen from the Hibs team in recent games, then, I don't think that's too much of a tall order at all.
No, I think, the whole getting into the top 6 thing, it's, it might not yield European football in the end, but I think it's just the key thing about it for me at the moment is just preventing the season from just meandering to just a really kind of low-key conclusion. Obviously, you get into the top 6, you do have the possibility, can we try and kick on for a European place? The players will be thinking that. You get some big games as well. You get an extra derby, games against Celtic and Rangers. It would maintain a level of interest and a level of excitement that would probably drop off if you end up in the bottom 6 without any real threat of being dragged into the dogfight at the very bottom. So yeah, as I say, it's just kind of all about trying to kind of keep the season, keep that momentum in the season all the way to the end, not ending up with just kind of dead rubber fixtures that aren't kind of capturing anybody's imagination. But yeah, that's all for after the international break, which obviously we're heading into just now. Can be a frustrating time for fans. It comes at a weird time. I always feel this international break when you are going right to the end before the split, and then the sort of momentum of that is interrupted. I always find this a kind of jarring one at this time of year. But it is what it is. We don't make the rules, unfortunately. But until domestic football returns, we will endeavour to keep you occupied with as much Hibs content as possible. But as for this briefing, we're going to leave it there for today. We will have plenty coming over the international break. And if you haven't subscribed to the Hibs server yet, as you can see on the ticker below, you can do that by visiting our website. Current offer we're running is £4 for 4 months, and for that you get as much Hibs content as your heart desires. For these,
that's your Hibs desires, please.
Your Hibs desires. Sorry, my apologies. Frequent videos, exclusive interviews, pre-match and post-match reaction, presser content, and everything else in between, tactical analysis thrown in there as well. So as I say, you can check that out via the link below. We're going to leave it there for this morning. So I just want to say thank you as always for joining us, and we will see you again next time. Cheers.